like most folks in the field, that they were rotated to Pease Air Force Base in New Hampshire. And although there was this history, it was amped up following this. The parallels and this paper, with Dean's permission, I will forward it to you because I think it is something that people should be aware of, although I'm pushing him to write it up as a book. The fact is that in 1961, in September, we have the Betty and Barney Hill abduction incident. And as you noted from the paper, the Hills become very involved, not just professionally, but in terms of deep friendships with a number of the officers from the 509th. It's one of the original staff officers from the 509th who first suggests that they even consider this new technique that Dr. Simon has been using to help World War II veterans who had shell shock, as they used to call it, to recover the memories of what the officer is convinced is a genuine alien event. When the story re-explodes after the 1965 incident at Exeter, and all of a sudden the Hills, even though their event is 4 years earlier, are the subject of international press, it is a member of the 509th who is already a friend of theirs who steps forward and says in so many words, "You can stay at my place. They can't get on the base. They will leave you alone," the equivalent of the paparazzi. And so it goes right to the end of Betty's life that a core of her closest friends, colleagues, confidants, and people who Barney respected and admired were officers with the 509th who had been transferred from Roswell, New Mexico.
And do you get a sense from Dean or from other writers about whether, it sounded like they were protective at some point, but whether or not they shared any insight in their own beliefs about what was happening to the Hills?
It definitely does sound like that's the case. Again, I'm putting together pieces here that Dean has laid out for me and starting to cross-reference with rereading for the first time in some years the wonderful books by John Fuller, Incident at Exeter and The Interrupted Journey, both still very much worth reading, as well as Stan Friedman and Kathy Marden's Captured. But it seems to me that whether it was just an aspect of friendship or, as we know, coincidences often mask things that are not coincidental, whether there was a little predestination here or link-ups that were more than coincident, nothing could surprise me less. But at the least, it is a remarkable series of interlocking UFO-related events which cover several of the most significant UFO events of all time. The incident at Exeter, Roswell, the Hill case.
Tell the incident at Exeter story. We know the Hill case pretty well. We know Roswell pretty well. Tell this one, because it is you're right about John Fuller. It's a great book.
It surely is. And this man was a writer's writer as well as a first-class journalist. It actually happened on September 3rd, 1965, and began with personnel at Pease Air Force Base observing a huge, fully articulated disc coming in over their airspace. We'll get back to that shortly. An 18-year-old who was the central witness in this, who was about to serve 3 tours of duty in Vietnam, named Norman Muscadero, was hitching home and watched as a thing, as he called it, came in over his head. It was about 90 feet in diameter with a rim of pulsating red lights. In other words, there was nothing ambiguous about this. The craft wobbled. It drifted toward him. He hit the ground in absolute fear and was able to flag down a passing car, which drove him to the police station, where he connected up with an officer named Reginald Toland, who felt what he had said was fantastic, but it had other reports like this. He and another patrolman, an Air Force veteran, went out onto the highway shortly before because they had heard a woman call in about this. Ultimately, it was seen by a number of people, including the cops, who were furious when the base absolutely and categorically told the media, when they started calling the next morning, that there had been no reports and that no one on the base had seen anything. And in fact, the 2 police officers wrote one of the most unusual letters on the records of Project Blue Book. They were furious that the implication had been that they were lying. This area dovetails into the Hill story because it is been so inundated with UFO sightings and observations, certainly from that period as well as continuing to now, that it's called UFO Alley. And in fact, we'll be having a tour of the area as part of the Exeter Festival and Conference coming up on, in a week and a half or so.
Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Before we leave this, okay, so the 509th, it's at Roswell, then it goes to New Hampshire. It's like UFO stories and mythology follow it. Or you could say that maybe the 509th is creating this stuff, some sort of a psychological exercise wherever it goes.
Well, yeah, God only knows. Again, the fact is that at that point, if you study the history of the 509th, and the paper lays it out very nicely, they were, in so many words, the most powerful fighting machine in the world at the time.
Hey, Peter, hold on a second. The music tells us we need to take a brief break. Bruce Hornsby, who is taking us into the break, you might think the guy's disappeared, but he's still out there, still touring, and it's a great song, maybe his best-known song. Stay with us for more, Coast to Coast AM. Coming up in Hour 2, Farah Yerduzu, and then later David Huggins will be here to talk about the book they collaborated on, Love in an Alien Purgatory, about David's alleged lifetime of encounters, romantic encounters with some sort of alien beings. And maybe we should cue some Barry White music to go along with this, but it's a wild story. Can't wait to hear that. In the meantime, Peter Robbins is with us talking about New England's very active UFO scene. We'll get into that, maybe open up the phone lines for a couple of your questions right after this on Coast to Coast AM. We're talking with Peter Robbins about a history of strange stuff going on in New England. Peter, before we get too far down the line and open up the phone lines, could you tell me about this event you got coming up?
Yeah, it's going to be a one-day event. It's going to take place 2 weeks from yesterday. That's the 4th on a Saturday. And it is the Exeter, New Hampshire UFO Festival and Conference. The idea is to build on the basic formula that has been in play in Roswell and in McMinnville, Oregon, to educate folks about the seriousness of the events that happened in those municipality areas, while at the same time creating a very family-friendly, kid-friendly, fun event. For me, it's a very specific line that makes it okay to put together such a serious subject as UFOs with anything that would go under the name of festival, namely that it can't be mean-spirited, it can't be mocking, it can't be sarcastic. It is arguably a schizophrenic kind of event because in one sense we have serious study conferences or symposia, and in the other we have just a good time. And Exeter deserves this opportunity. It's also, I have to say, especially for you Southwesterners, this is the ultimate Currier and Ives print version of New England that you grow up with in your imagination. It's just gorgeous. And it's a beautiful place to have an event like this. In fact, the talks will take place in the perfectly preserved Civil War era town hall, and it will truly be a town hall meeting. It will be free to the public, and we have a number of secret weapons that are going to make this a major success. The first, and I don't have to stress this to you, is a man named Tim Banal, who happens to have an association with you, and he's going to be our MC. We have Steve Fermani, who is the director of New England MUFON, and that is all those New England states, who's working hard behind the scenes and also going to be a speaker. I'll be giving that talk on the connections between the aspects we were just talking about. We're going to have our very first induction into the Exeter UFO Hall of Fame. Author and researcher Phil Imbrovno, partly known for his work on America's Stonehenge, a post-Neolithic dig very close to these UFO activities. Our featured speaker will be Mr. Stanton T. Friedman, and he'll be discussing the subject of his new book with Kathleen Marden, When Science Was Wrong. I'll be presenting on my favorite old Soviet case, the Voronozh case, and we'll have a panel discussion, a dance that night. All the businesses in the community are going to be participating, and every bit of profit, once we start making profit, will go to children's services within the community.
How do you make profit on an event that's free?
Well, no, in terms of revenue recovered, taxes put in, they're going to figure out a way to set aside money that comes into the city that the town, that normally would not. Obviously the individual merchants will be making money, hopefully, selling whatever they sell, and restaurants also will be participating. They have a wonderful bookstore there, and those of us that have books will also have them for sale. So again, we do hope to create an event that's an awful lot of fun, that is centerpieced by a serious one-day conference. And if the weather holds out, we're expecting at least 1,000 people. It is a drop-dead gorgeous area, and there will be self-conductable tours and hopefully guided tours of what we call the UFO Alley there and the sites of the Exeter incident and the Hills events.
Well, that sounds like a pretty cool event. That's a power-packed lineup you've got there. We've got a link on the Coast to Coast AM website if you didn't jot that down and want more information. Back to the subject we were talking about before the break, the possibility of the whole thing being disinformation, that somehow the government has made this up. There's no real proof that UFOs are real. It's all just some sort of a psychological exercise.
I no longer have the luxury of disbelief after 30-odd years in this field, and about a dozen of those as Bud Hopkins' assistant. I have simply, and I speak purely personally here, George, I have simply seen too much physical evidences, corroborating evidences from mental and medical health professionals, corroborating witness accounts from family members, anomalous health histories, pathological, unrealistic fears rooted in experiences that have actually happened to people. So I find that really an intellectually arrogant position. They're simply saying the usual old mantra. It can't be. Therefore it isn't. Therefore it's something else. And why should I even bother to demean myself to study your so-called proofs when we all know it's just UFOs and little green men, and it can't be real, or we'd all know about it by now. Now, to somebody who is a little anxious about the subject, who has not studied in it, that kind of attitude has won votes for 63 years now. But it's patent nonsense for anybody that takes the time to study some of the best evidences that we have out there that are freely available.
And you said physical evidence. Do you have physical evidence in the New England area, in the New Hampshire area, that you would say that here is something you can latch on to?
Yeah, we have some of the physical evidences from the Hill case, a stain on Betty's dress, the chemical composition they've never been able to fully nail down. I would say most of the physical evidences I'm aware of, including physical changes to part of the metal of the automobile the Hills were driving in that night, are all archived in a nearby library. Kathleen kindly donated a good deal of Betty's original materials that from that night and following up. Also, I would bet you that if you took the first-generation audio tapes that Dr. Simon did with the Hills, and I'm sure you've heard clips of them, George. They're absolutely hair-raising. And you ran them through voice stress analysis technology. What they would establish would be that even the best Strasberg-trained actor could not duplicate the actual human stress in those voices. For me, that is a kind of physical evidence. And again, I'm off on a tangent here. But most of the best physical evidence that I'm aware of, and again, I'm still educating myself to this whole area of specialty that I'm kind of stumbled into here,